Dopamine does not spike when you get the reward. It spikes before you get it, in the anticipation of it. This single neurological fact, established by Wolfram Schultz and colleagues in 1997, explains why earning more rarely makes people feel wealthier, why the next purchase never quite satisfies, and why some of the richest individuals on Earth still report feeling financially anxious. The trap is not psychological weakness. It is the architecture of the brain itself. In 1997, a neuroscientist named Wolfram Schultz, working with Peter Dian and Reed Montague, published research that should have rewritten how we think about money, ambition, and desire. He was studying dopamine, the brain's primary reward signaling chemical, by recording the electrical activity of individual neurons in primates. The experimental setup appeared straightforward: present a reward, measure the response. What emerged was not what anyone expected. The dopamine neurons did not fire when the animal received the reward. They fired when the animal anticipated it was coming. And when the reward arrived exactly as predicted, the neurons went silent. In subsequent work published with Dickinson in 2000, Schultz formalized this as a prediction error system. The brain does not respond to what you receive. It responds to the gap between what you expected and what actually arrived. If reality matches expectation, nothing. If reality exceeds expectation, dopamine fires. If reality falls short, the signal drops below baseline. This has profound implications for anyone trying to build, accumulate, or manage wealth. We are not the stable, preference-satisfying agents that classical economics assumed. We are anticipation machines. The brain was built to pursue. And the moment of arrival is, by neurological design, a disappointment waiting to happen. In the next 13 minutes, we will trace exactly how this plays out across earning, spending, and social behavior, and what the evidence actually suggests you can do about it. Let us stay with the original experimental architecture, because the mechanism is important to understand precisely. In the early stages of Schultz's experiments, animals received a reward, a small amount of juice, with no prior signal. The dopamine neurons fired robustly at the moment of delivery. That matched intuition. Reward arrives, dopamine responds. Then a conditioning stimulus was introduced, a light that flashed half a second before the juice arrived. Over repeated trials, something precise occurred. The dopamine response migrated. It stopped firing at the moment of juice delivery and began firing at the moment of the light. The anticipatory signal had captured the entire dopamine response. More striking still, once the association was learned, if the light flashed and the juice failed to appear, the dopamine neurons dropped below their resting baseline. Below zero. A negative prediction error, a neural signal registering that reality arrived worse than expected. There is no equivalent firing for a reward that arrives exactly as predicted. The system registers simply, expected, move on. Now translate that into the language of financial life. Every raise you anticipated for months. Every investment milestone you checked daily. Every bonus you had already mentally allocated before it arrived. The moment of receipt is not, neurologically, a moment of gain. It is the confirmation of a prior prediction. And confirmed predictions, in this architecture, are worth precisely nothing to the dopamine system. The account goes to zero at the moment of arrival. If this kind of evidence-grounded analysis is what you look for, subscribe to the channel. We publish 3 times a week, and every episode starts from the research, not from the conclusion. This is the first mechanism of the dopamine trap. The second is what makes it structural rather than situational. Research by Barrage and Robinson, published in 1998, identified that repeated exposure to rewarding stimuli leads, over time, to a decrease in the dopamine response. The technical term is habituation. In practical terms, the brain gets used to the level. What once produced a strong anticipatory signal produces a weaker one. The threshold for what counts as a positive prediction error recalibrates upward, automatically. This means that a financial life structured around milestones, the first 6-figure income, the paid-off mortgage, the 7-figure portfolio, delivers a progressively smaller neurological payoff with each achievement. Not because the achievement is less real, because the brain had already priced it in. The reward was consumed in the anticipation. The arrival is flat. Evidence in this area suggests this dynamic is particularly pronounced among individuals skilled at setting and reaching goals. Those who consistently close the gap between intention and outcome are running the prediction error system at peak efficiency. And peak efficiency means the signal diminishes fastest. Success accelerates habituation. The dopamine system, as Salomon and Correa described in 2002, is not primarily a pleasure system. It is a motivation system. It produces the drive to pursue, not the satisfaction of arrival. The architecture is optimized for forward motion, not for rest. This is the mechanism behind what researchers call the hedonic treadmill, the consistent observation that people return to a stable baseline of well-being regardless of significant positive life changes. Income rises. Baseline recalibrates. The prior income level now registers as insufficient. For high earners and entrepreneurs, the people most likely to believe that the next threshold will finally be the satisfying one. This is a structural problem, not a personal one. The bar rises automatically. Not because something is wrong with you, because something is working exactly as designed. Now turn from earning to spending, because the same mechanism operates there, with an additional layer that makes consumer culture unusually effective at exploiting it. In 2003, Fiorillo, Tobler, and Schultz published research demonstrating that the dopamine system does not respond equally to all rewards. Uncertain rewards, outcomes with an unknown probability, produced a significantly higher dopamine response than certain ones. The brain is not simply measuring expected value. It is disproportionately responsive to the possibility that something good might happen. This is the neurological foundation of variable reward systems. A guaranteed outcome produces a muted dopamine signal. An uncertain one produces a pronounced spike. Predictability, to the anticipation system, is simply boring. Consumer behavior exploits this directly. Consider the experience of a purchase decision, the browsing phase, the comparing, the imagining of ownership. Research in this area suggests the anticipatory phase generates a robust dopamine signal. The item arrives. The packaging is opened. And within hours, sometimes minutes, the neural response returns to baseline. This is not a failure of willpower. It is the prediction error system working exactly as designed. The acquisition confirmed the prediction. Nothing exceeded expectation. The brain has already moved on to the next anticipatory target. Work by Whitman, Bunzek, Dolan, and Duzel, published in 2007, suggested that novel stimuli, new objects, new environments, unfamiliar information, elicit a higher dopamine response than familiar ones. Which means the consumer economy's relentless cycle of product releases is calibrated, at a neurological level, precisely to reset the anticipation circuit. The product does not need to be better. It needs to be different. Different is, to the dopamine system, more compelling than better. This creates a spending loop that no amount of accumulated income can close. Greater resources generate greater acquisition capacity. Acquisition generates habituation. Habituation generates craving for novelty. Novelty resets the anticipation cycle. The loop does not terminate. The satisfaction was never in the product. It was in the wanting. And the wanting, by design, does not survive delivery. We have traced the internal architecture of the trap, the anticipation spike, the prediction error system, the habituation ceiling, the novelty premium. But there is a dimension of this that most discussions of dopamine and finance never reach. The dopamine system does not operate in isolation from other people. It is tracking something beyond your bank balance. It is tracking where you stand relative to others. And that layer changes the entire picture. Evidence from Fair and Kammerer, published in 2007, suggests that the brain's reward circuitry is significantly influenced by social comparison, by where an individual perceives their position to sit relative to their immediate reference group. Social standing appears to function as an independent input to the reward system, not simply a contextual modifier. This connects directly to the foundation established by Kahneman and Tversky in their 1979 research on decision-making, The brain's response to losses appears to be roughly twice as powerful as its response to equivalent gains. Losing $10,000 registers more intensely than gaining $10,000 feels positive. Combine these two dynamics, sensitivity to social position and asymmetric loss aversion, and you arrive at a system that is structurally unstable in environments of visible inequality. As income rises, the reference group shifts. The peers against whom position is implicitly tracked are no longer the prior neighbors or colleagues. They are the people now visible in the new environment. And the losses that carry the most neurological weight are no longer absolute losses, they are relative ones. Falling in the ranking, slipping in perceived standing. Evidence in this area suggests this is a significant driver of financial insecurity among high earners. People who are materially secure by most objective measures, but who experience persistent anxiety because their reward system is not measuring wealth in absolute terms. It is measuring trajectory relative to a peer group that has also moved. The billionaire who has lost comparative standing to a peer with more has, in terms of the brain's loss aversion machinery, experienced something that registers closer to a loss than a gain, despite accumulated resources that would have been unimaginable at an earlier stage. The trap does not care about the number. It cares about the direction of travel. Now we arrive at what the science actually suggests, not as motivational prescription, but as a mechanistic response to a mechanistic problem. If the dopamine system is optimized for anticipation, if habituation erodes the signal over time, and if conventional financial success simply accelerates recalibration upward, then standard financial advice is solving for the wrong variable. Accumulate more is the instruction. But more does not change the prediction error architecture. It only raises the floor. The research points toward 4 structural adjustments. First, effort gating. Salamone and Correa's work on dopamine and motivation established that the system responds more robustly to goals that require sustained effort. This is not an endorsement of unnecessary difficulty. It is an observation that effort-gated rewards produce a more durable anticipatory signal, because they take longer to predict with confidence. Structuring goals so that meaningful effort, not just capital, but time, skill, or problem-solving, is required may preserve the dopamine signal deeper into the pursuit. Second, managed uncertainty. Fiorillo and colleagues' finding on uncertain reward suggests that highly predictable financial routines, while essential for accumulation, may produce minimal dopamine engagement. There is a meaningful distinction between introducing uncertainty into how rewards are experienced and introducing recklessness into how assets are managed. The former may be neurologically productive. The latter is simply poor risk management. Third, genuine novelty over repackaged familiarity. Evidence suggests that experiences, genuinely new contexts, skills, or environments, generate a higher dopamine response than material upgrades that occupy the same neural category as what came before. A new device is, to the reward system, just another device. A genuinely new experience registers differently. Fourth, deliberate choice of reference class. If the dopamine system tracks social comparison, then consciously selecting which peer group serves as your benchmark is not rationalization. It is applied neuroscience. None of this eliminates the trap. The architecture does not change. But understanding the mechanism allows for something that willpower alone does not. Designing financial behavior around the brain you actually have, rather than the rational, preference-stable agent that classical financial theory has always assumed you to be. The question is not how to stop wanting. Wanting is the system. The question is where you point it. The dopamine trap is not a character flaw. It is not poor discipline or insufficient ambition. It is a prediction error system operating exactly as Wolfram Schultz described in 1997, calibrated for anticipation, indifferent to arrival, and structurally incapable of delivering permanent satisfaction. This is the neuroscience that most financial advice omits entirely, because it complicates the narrative. It suggests that the objective is not to earn your way to contentment, but to understand the machinery well enough to stop expecting it to deliver something it was never designed to produce. That is what this channel does. It takes the research seriously, follows the evidence where it leads, and does not soften the conclusions to make them more comfortable. If that is the kind of analysis you want in your feed, subscribe. New episodes published 3 times a week. And if you want to go deeper into how loss aversion specifically distorts financial decision-making, that video is right here.